Hello, good evening, and welcome to the first live stream of the week. So, first of all, thank you very much for turning up here to be with us this evening. As always, I appreciate your time here. So, hello to the gang. I can see Ozzy, Chris, Mr. Joe Cool, John. So, first of all, so as you join, I'll do my usual preamble. So, suffice to say that whilst we're here to do the talking, you're here to do a few things as well. You've got to work for your time here. So if you're watching this on Facebook, share it and like it. If you're watching it on YouTube, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new live streams, because occasionally I just go and do them whenever I take the notion. So just be aware of that. And also make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, because those naughty people over on YouTube just occasionally unsubscribe people. I have no idea why. Obviously, all my other social media links are down below, so you can find me on all the other platforms, blah, 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 blah. Just make sure you do follow me in all of them. Again, you never know when the moment of censorship comes. If you like what you're saying or what you're hearing tonight, give us a thumbs up. The algorithms like the thumbs up, so give the thumbs up. And if you don't like what we're saying, don't say anything. Finally, there's altnewsmedia.net/donate to go and drop a few pounds in the hat. Or if you are Chris Davis, hit the super chat. And just on that, so I think those are all the preambles. We're going to talk, Chris, about Trump being back, because Rebecca and I talk about the topics we're going to cover each week, and there's lots of things always happen in the news cycle. But I watched the Trump speech at CPAC last night, and I thought it's worth talking about, because it's going to dominate the political world, I think, in the next number of years, perhaps. So we're going to talk about that. I think that's about it, really. But we're going to talk about something else, because, again, in fact, actually, can we drum roll, bring her on? I see her just having a pre-show drink. Anyway, Rebecca Butler joins the stream. Hello, good evening, Rebecca.
Hi, David. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you again. I see we're coming in from Hawaii with Dawny Girls, so nice to see you all, and thank you for having me, David, as usual.
It's always a pleasure, Rebecca, trust me. In fact, Rebecca, as we were just saying there, we do talk about the topics and whatnot. And sometimes it's almost like we live in a world it's only a COVID world. And yes, COVID's really important. And you and I talk about it quite a bit. We debate each other on it. But sometimes I think it's nice really not to talk about COVID, just occasionally. Because there is other stuff going on in the world. And I did watch the Trump speech at CPAC last night, and I do think that does have global political significance. And I want to chat about that. But the other thing that we mustn't forget about, Rebecca, is that there is a world still going on out there, regardless of whatever strains of COVID are around and hospital infections and all that. There's still a world of stuff going on out there, and our economy lies at the heart of it. So that's my way of saying, on Wednesday, the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, is going to stand up and give the budget speech. And I don't know about you, but sometimes you think, would I like to be in his shoes or not? Now, I'm sure he wears extremely well-polished shoes, and he's a very adept speaker, and I think he's a pretty impressive personality. But let's talk about the job that confronts him on Wednesday, and what, where do you think he's going to come from? Because I've got loads of slides I want to put up, but let's just start off with what do you think the Chancellor will do, or what do you think he should do?
Well, what I think he will do and what I think he should do are actually two different things. I think he's a very adept politician. I think he's a very adept Chancellor. I think the nice thing about Rishi Sunak is he's not, a prince of darkness like George Osborne was. I think he's powerful than Sajid Javid, who I was a bit disappointed with him as a Chancellor, even though it was a very brief tenure.
Yeah.
So I do think he is a very, very competent, safe pair of hands. Don't see the snake-like political behavior from him. I think he knows that it will be a coronation when Boris's day is done, and he will just sit in the sidelines waiting for that day. He's very much under Downing Street because of the restructuring that happened that led to Sajid Javid saying he wouldn't take the role because basically their offices merged. And
Yeah.
Number 10 really took responsibility for the messaging coming out of the of Number 11. But in terms of what I think he'll do, I'm worried that he might attack businesses. I'm very concerned he might do that. It does worry me, but I hope that if he does tax businesses, the ones that he goes for are Amazon, Facebook, Starbucks, people like that who are big and don't pay enough in tax as it is. Now, you and I on this show have talked about Amazon taxes before, and I think absolutely everybody would recognize that via Amazon, China manages to import tariff-free into the UK. And those tariffs ought to be paid. There's also a VAT issue. So there's a massive tax evasion that goes on through that gig economy. And I really do hope that Amazon tax gets paid. Now, if that's just a set transaction fee, or I would hate to see people paying more because a tariff was applied, but I wouldn't hate to see people, say, spending £1 per transaction, or Amazon having to pay £1 per transaction, because that's not going to affect the buyer particularly. And I think, Rishi knows that there is actually a huge amount of money stored up in people's bank accounts. It's not earning money on their interest. So there is a lot of money waiting to be released. There is a bit of a floodgate waiting. It's going to go on holidays, staycations, big parties, weddings, stuff like that. So I would really hope that he doesn't tax those sectors, because that would be wrong and that would have a stifling effect. I would hope that he would cut business rates, but I think he's going to put up corporation tax. He may put capital gains tax up. So I see it being a bit of a little bit here, a little bit there. I also hope the stamp duty holiday is extended. I'd really like to see that, because that's been a huge success. And there are all sorts of things that they're talking about, like 95% mortgages for first-time buyers. That's really important, again, because there are loads of people with stored up deposits who need to get onto the housing market.
One of the things, Rebecca, is the media, as is always the way in advance of a budget, there's all kinds of headlines being pushed out there. Here's just a couple of things that I've read in the past few days. You may have seen them as well. If we can just flip a couple of these ones up. Yeah, so calls for Rishi to extend the furlough scheme in UK budget. I think that's a no-brainer. I think that's definitely going to be happening. So regardless of the enormous cost of the extension of furlough, again, Rebecca, you and I have talked about this a lot. And you got to, well, it's
about this, I have to say.
Pardon, Rebecca?
I do have some discomfort about this. It's a bit of a license, I think. But anyway,
I agree. It's one of those ones whereby the government policy necessitates it in a way, but in another way, it's a really wasteful amount of our taxation. But there it is. But anyway, I think that's going to happen. We've got to bring up the next one, please. More Brits favour scrapping stamp duty. So that's, again, Brits wanting the income coming into the Treasury reduced. So good luck with that. But that might happen as well. Bring up the next one. Drum roll. There we go. Alistair Darling. There's a voice from the past, Rebecca. Alistair Darling. And this is one of those ones, Rebecca. And I was going to chat to you about this one actually last week, I think it was. So he says Labour is politics, obviously. But both Darling and I know Sir Keir has also said it would be very bad to raise taxes in general and taxes in business in particular. But Darling's he's kind of got a point, hasn't he?
Yes, he has. And of course, one thing that Alistair Darling and Rishi Sunak have in common is that they were both chancellors in a big crisis. So Alistair Darling had the subprime crisis and the crash of 2008. And Alistair Darling introduced us to quantitative easing from the Bank of England and the massive cut in interest rate. I've always thought that Alistair Darling was actually a competent and a credible voice from that Gordon Brown government. I would credit him with greater ability than Gordon Brown to be the job in Helen. I actually quite admired Alistair Darling, and I did think he did steer a steady ship through that awful subprime banking crisis. So yes, I agree. And you know what? Please don't put us through austerity again. That would just be disastrous. I really don't want to see cuts in public spending. Really don't want to see that. I would like to see HS2 scrapped, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, but I would like to see public infrastructure spending. But I want to see just people being released from holding on to their money and releasing it back into the economy. For me, if you increase the level of benefits payable, you are simply sort of relocating the money back into the economy because it comes back in VAT receipts. So for every £100 you give somebody, you get 20 quid back on a VAT spend. So
well, but I mean, I see Jed's made the point there. He'd like to see IR 35. I think is the point. Stopped for the private sector. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, this was something that came up. It sort of reared its head because it was a policy that they had countenanced back a year ago, in fact. But because of the pandemic, they kind of put it on ice. But the IR35, if anybody doesn't know, it really is, there's a huge group of people who tend to be very well paid. It's not all of them, but a lot of them tend to be very well paid, where they operate as a one-man limited company, and as such get massive tax breaks. And the idea is they ought to be saving for a rainy day. But equally, I think the narrative is right that if you're not contributing to the tax burden, which the rest of us are, then why should you get the benefits of all the other taxpayers? So why should a management consultant who calls themselves John Smith Limited, why should they get the same benefit when it all goes TU, as it has in the last year, as say the guys who work on my building site who pay tax? And, nobody asked for the pandemic, but you can't have the same take out of a tax system if you haven't got the same proportionate in. And it does, the demographic of people who the IR35 will predominantly hit are that group of management consultants, interim CEOs, interim CFOs, all those kind of guys who are doing it for sneaky tax evasion and NI evasion. That's what it's all about.
I think, Jed makes a point as well. He didn't get any furlough and he was not allowed to claim. And Jed, you were by no means alone. I mean, that was, again, one of the bad things. But I wanted to, sometimes I want to be devil's advocate here. And if we can put up, I wanted to look at UK public sector net borrowing. And I've got a chart where we like a bit of data. I like charts. If we could bring up the public sector net borrowing chart, that would be really good.
Your economics degree wasn't wasted, David.
It's what I don't know. That's such a long time ago, Rebecca. But yeah, the point about this really is, this just simply demonstrates. You can see in this. You can see, Rebecca. You talked about the crisis we had back in you know, 09, 10 and the banking crisis. And you can see what the effect that had. But let's pull back and look at that. Yeah, 2020. So that's and then the rest of it is forecast. And one thing I learned, Rebecca, over the years in economics, forecasts, you know, one man's forecast is another man's just wild estimate. But there's no doubt about it. The UK, I think I'm right in saying, Rebecca, our borrowing is now back at levels last seen in 1697. So we shouldn't underestimate the challenge that the Treasury and the Chancellor faces, because, you know, if I was facing that, and that's staggering, absolutely staggering. And I think that the figures that flow from that forecast-wise, in my view, are a bit on the optimistic side. But even if they're not, it still means that the UK economy is going to be, it has been hit with a mega shunt, you know, a mega jolt. And it's not obvious because we've got 6 million people in furlough. The economy's frozen. It's all being funded by the government's borrowing. But it's just not credible to sustain like that, is it?
Well, you know, a little while ago, I asked a question on Twitter. And the question was, who do we owe the money to? Public sector borrowing. Because you don't. You don't actually owe that money to anybody. And I, of course, as you can imagine on Twitter, I got the usual, you're meant to be intelligent, you stupid woman, don't you understand? Well, actually, I do understand. And one of the question is really a rhetorical question, which is, it's government bonds, basically, that is what borrowing is. So you quantitatively ease, you put more cash into the circulation, and you borrow against the future value of your bonds. But every economy is in the same position. So we're not borrowing from the IMF. We're not borrowing from the World Bank. We're not borrowing in that way. We're borrowing against ourselves. We're hedging ourselves effectively.
We're hedging we're hedging our future, or in regards our economics future. Actually, we're not even, it doesn't really particularly affect us, but it affects, Rebecca, being you and me and people like us, it will significantly impact our children and our grandchildren, perhaps, if unless things fall into balance, you know. But
why? Because we got historically low interest rates. We need a little bit more inflation, although not at the moment, because we don't really want to skew the economy to give savers more money on their savings. We actually want them to spend their money. And as long as you have a vibrant economy where things are manufactured and things are sold and things are bought, then the actual number that you owe is irrelevant. Because, you know, when I was born, when you were born, it wasn't a big deal that we were still paying the war debt back from the Second World War. We only stopped paying that back about 14 years ago. So pay back to who? You know, this is a global problem. Therefore, there is a grand neutralizing effect apart from China, but a grand neutralizing effect on everybody. So my view is, please don't put us back into austerity. Please don't cut public services. Build council houses like crazy, because we can capture the rent back from the welfare payments. Build more, do more. Don't go back into austerity. The number, in my opinion, isn't really that much of a deal. But I'm not an economist. I'm just saying, who do we owe the money to?
Yeah, well, there's several answers to that, but you touched on a really interesting point. I just wanted to throw this one into the stream. I'm going to be streaming on Thursday night. I've got a special guest who is an expert in the issue on the area of housing, construction of housing in the UK housing stock, the problems that we face, and all of that. So tune in on Thursday night, please. It's going to be really interesting. Just focused on what Rebecca just mentioned there indirectly, the whole housing issue, which again, like so many issues, Rebecca, it was a really big issue up until COVID hit. And then like so many other issues, it's been kind of swept away a little bit. And but problems are still there, and we need to deal with those problems. And so we're going to be tackling that on Thursday night. So do make sure you join in that conversation at 8 o'clock. I wanted to actually, I'm going to just give you a second or two to key this one up, Rebecca, because I know there was a slide that you put up that you shared actually with me just a little bit earlier. And I think, again, I mean, these are different aspects of the economic overview. But if we just bring this one up now, maybe you can talk us through it, Rebecca. If it's in, I think that's it. Maybe we can zoom in a little bit, because it's unless you've got really good eyesight, maybe you all folks can all see it, but I can't. Anyway, Rebecca, over to you.
Yes, this is basically it's called 60-day delinquency rate. So this is people defaulting on loans. Now, the y-axis is percent and the x-axis is numbers. And then this is by month. Yes, so right. You can see that the delinquency rates on repayment of car leases and car loans has gone up quite steeply as a result of the pandemic. And then you'll see all of them to a greater or lesser extent. Just bear in mind that the y-axis does change in its scale as we're going down these. But it's a measure of repayment of debt. So cars, credit cards, mortgages, and other unsecured debts. So unsecured against your properties, that is. And this was sent to me by my son, who is also an economist. And he said, look, this sort of was looking at this today. Yeah. And what it really talks about is it's young people. It's the younger than middle-aged. They can't default on rentals or mortgages. Absolutely not. So other things have to go first. But it's mounting debt on an age demographic that already has a significant debt when they come out of university because of their student debt. Yeah. So by very virtue of the fact that they've got that debt profile of cars, credit cards, so on and so forth, by virtue of that means they are also paying off their student debt. And so it's stacking this interminable problem of lockdown on the younger generation, and the generation that needs the most help. It's an impossible situation how to give them help if you are also looking at massive national debt where inflation's got to go up, for example. So
that's right. Yeah.
Their clothes are going to cost more, so their ability to pay their debt is going to go down because their sort of activities of daily life are going to have to be funded out of a wage packet. And if inflation, if we remain in a deflationary economy, then their savings aren't going to be worth anything. So this is a really big problem that is like the hidden story here is what delinquency rates are going up. I dread to think, because we're only at the beginning, I dread to think what those delinquency rates will look like this time next year, because as I've always said, this is the start of the problem. We're not at the end or even the end of the beginning here. This is
I agree, Rebecca. I think so much of the damage that's been caused to the economy and to just people generally, it's kind of invisible. It's certainly not emerged. It's emerging in those sort of figures that you just shared with us. You can see some of the issues emerging there. But the other thing is that I actually think, for example, whilst the furlough scheme has done a job at a massive price, fundamentally there are sectors of the economy and businesses and companies, and they're not coming back. I mean, we just need to be honest about that. I don't believe some of them will come back unless we can get, Rebecca, to lockdown completely ended and all the social distancing and all the rest of it ended. And I don't see that happening. Do you? Not in the next 3, 6 months?
No, I don't. But it's really interesting because a comment has just come up on the stream from Joe. Hyperinflation is almost inevitable, and this is a real worry. We've already seen the beginnings of hyperinflation. Anybody who went out to a restaurant or a pub in summer last year will have seen that pub food prices skyrocketed. I mean, whereas before you would go out and think, sitting in a pub having, scampi and chips, you'd think, well, that's £7.50, maybe £8 for a basket meal. It's now £15. What would have cost you £25, including a bottle of wine, £25 a head? You're now paying £35 or £40 a head for a basket of scampi and chips and a starter and a bottle of rubbish red wine. Hyperinflation, once the economy opens up again, that which remains, because competition has fallen and because there's greed built into the system, they want last year's profits to be recovered now. Hyperinflation will happen. They've got to find a way to stop that, and I do dread Joe, that was a really good point to make, that it's inevitable that there will be hyperinflation. It's to what extent we can control it that's important.
Well, actually, Rebecca, you mentioned the fact that, food prices went up during the summer of 2020. If anyone has been buying from restaurants, although you can't go in and eat, you can buy like carryouts from restaurants. And I know family who have bought those like a meal for two from like a decent restaurant, but the prices are really, really high. And I understand why they're really high. I mean, I understand what the restaurants are doing, Rebecca, but in a sense, they're building into their pricing structure the fact that essentially they've been closed for so many months, they've got no profits. And so I think, it's almost a banker that prices will spiral upwards. The other thing is on just don't want to sort of wrap this one up pretty quickly, but on corporation tax, it seems really likely that corporation tax is going to go from 19% at the moment up to, well, they're saying over a couple of years, 25%. I would completely oppose that because I think it would damage British business, especially in the post-Brexit era when we're trying to become a global, economic power again. But I think the Chancellor may be tempted to go down the CT route. I would rather he did it selectively, as you pointed out, and go after particular sectors and leave other sectors alone. Most particularly British small business, leave it alone. Leave the hairdressers, the self-employed, the plumbers, leave those guys alone. Do not go after their little companies, or I don't mean to disparage them, but they're smaller businesses, and go after Amazon. Amazon's destroying the high street anyway. There again, if you go after Amazon, and I know this, Amazon will simply add the cost of the tax onto their seller base. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure who wins in that, but
no. But one thing, that again has come up in the stream is a really, really important metric of how global economies are doing is the price of oil. Now, it had a staggering volatility because it was about this time last year, or maybe in March, end of March, it was in negative numbers. Because, of course, the Saudi states are controlling the supply of oil. Now, they have flooded the market with billions of barrels of the stuff.
Yeah.
And the price plummeted. But now, I don't know if you follow oil, but, because my son is an oil guy. Yeah. It's $60 a barrel now. It's hugely expensive. So you know what? Put a hedge on it, because it's got to go down. It's got to go down to like 50, 52. But one final word. I know you want to move on. Yeah. What I would love to see in this budget, and I know this is a heresy, not for your stream, but certainly for the Conservatives, I would really like to see Rishi Sunak say Theresa May's legacy legislation, which was a complete disaster, which was her carbon neutral 2050 pledge, push that back to 2060, because we cannot afford that. We cannot afford a reduction in fuel duty revenues. Where are they going to replace those in a post-pandemic world where we've already lost fuel revenue? So I'd like to see the fuel customs duty cut, or at least stay stable. And then what is the plan for when it's electric? How are you going to recover that lost revenue, which is customs duty on fuel sales?
Yeah.
We can't cope with all of these things now. So push Theresa May's ridiculous legislation back. I'd see it pushed back into, 2200, but that's never going to happen. But
yeah, although I think there's a certain lady in number 10 Downing Street, very close to the Prime Minister, who does, I think, have a real thing about the green agenda, the low carbon agenda, all of this, which, in these kind of pandemic times, economically speaking, you just got to think, you got to wonder, I mean, is there any economic logic to it? Anyway, but nonetheless, we have, I think we got to the end of the first section there. There's loads with Rebecca. We should probably do a separate stream actually on the whole sort of zero carbon narrative and how it would work in the country and how it wouldn't work, what it means for people, all that kind of stuff. Because, it worries me enormously, because it's like it's just not thought. There's no common sense applied to it anyway. Anyway, we're going to wrap up this section, and we're going to, in a second or two, move on to talk about the guy who's dominated the global political narrative for the last year, Donald Trump. But before we get to that, just a reminder that, as I say, super chats are enabled on the stream. So if you want to get your comment dealt with by Rebecca and myself, do make sure you hit the super chat button. And moving on, last night, like a vampire rising from the dead, Donald Trump made his appearance at CPAC, and I don't know if you watched it all, Rebecca, but I did. I watched a bit of it, and then I kept watching it, and I kept watching it, and I watched it all the way through to the end. And I gotta say, after November, I thought Trump had probably, his shelf life had expired. And I didn't really see, much as I was a big supporter, how he could make a comeback, particularly. I watched him last night, and I've got a little video clip I wanna put up. But just a couple. Indulge me in this one. So here's just a couple of moments from Trump last night. A couple of his highlights. Play.
But who knows? Who knows? I may even decide to beat them for a third time, okay? Beat them for a third time.
I think, well, Rebecca, I'll go to you. Thoughts?
I mean, that comment had everything packed in it, didn't it?
It just I know, so much there.
He's still saying, I won the 2020.
Yes.
He's playing with them. He's triggering them. He's saying, I may stand. You don't know. But I don't think he will. I just can't see it. And I think what Trump would have preferred, if I'm going to be honest, he expected to win his second term.
So did I.
I still maintain that it was the COVID what got him. It was the coronavirus that disrupted democracy. I really, really think that. Now, you might say that's through postal votes, so we're kind of in agreement that that's where the coronavirus affected it. But come what may, I still think coronavirus did affect that Democratic vote. So I think he would have had a second term. And I think at the end of the second term, he would have been looking at Jared Kushner, Ivanka, Donald Trump Jr. He would be looking at those guys for his legacy, because bizarrely, they're a republic, but they don't half like their dynasties. They don't half like their political families to run the show. We had the Bushes, the Clintons, Eisenhower was in twice. They absolutely love it. So, I can't see that he at 78 is going to run.
Well,
I can't see it.
You say that. So talking of 78, I wanted to play another clip of a 78-year-old. And Trump was, he was full of energy. I don't know what he was on, Rebecca, but he was certainly pumped. It was a very smooth, mellifluous speech. He certainly learned the political craft over the past 4 years in the White House. And whether you like him or loathe him, I guess he came across to me as a guy at 74, which he is now, full of energy, really pumped up, and vigorous. Now I want to play a short clip of the current incumbent in the White House. Play.
I think anyone runs for president or is elected if they have a thin skin.
Set up my son to work in an oil company.
Oh, I have to take the test. Why the hell would I take a test? Come on, man. That's like saying before you got in this program, if you take a test where you're taking cocaine or not, what do you think, huh? Are you a junkie?
What do you say?
Shirley Jackson Lee, Al Green, Sylvia Garcia, Lizzie Pinelli, Pinell, and what am I doing here? COVID has taken this year, just since the outbreak, it's taken more than 100 years. Look, here's the lives. I mean, you think about it. More lives this year than any other year for the past 100 years. What am I doing here?
What is he doing here? Well, he's president. That's what he's doing here, Rebecca. And I would just contrast the weak Biden. And I don't take pleasure in, you see that clip? I don't take pleasure in that. This is a guy who's got cognitive decline. It's obvious he's got cognitive decline, and so I'm not actually seeking to particularly mock him, but I contrast his weakness with Trump's strength. And I think over the next 2 to 3 years, because I do think Trump amazingly will go for it again. I think age 78, I doubt Trump would be any worse than that. We've just seen. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there is a sense within the current White House that Biden is weak.
Yeah.
And what have they done? 22 airstrikes yesterday in Syria. They've already started the bombing, and so it is. I mean, I hate this. I hate Americans meddling in the Middle East. Syria. Do you know, the only country I think that had a decent policy in Syria was the Russians. But I mean, I'll probably get, silenced for saying it. Trump, Jared Kushner, I've seen some negative stuff on the chat about Jared Kushner. Let me tell you what Jared Kushner did and why he was massively impressive. He's only 35, 36, so he's very, very young. He was put in charge of negotiating Middle East peace. Now, this is something that has defeated every single US president for years and years, since the 1970s. They've never been able to broker peace because they focused on the Palestinian issue, and they were always touchy about landing on one side or another. So what Jared Kushner did was he went in and said, well, I'm not going to look at the problem that way. I am going to ask people what the biggest problem is. So he asked all of the Arab states and Israel what the biggest problem in the Middle East was. It's not Palestine, it's Iran. They're all under threat from Iran. So he brokered the my enemy's enemy is my friend peace deal between Israel and the big Arab states like Saudi Arabia, who all share an antipathy for Iran. So give the guy credit at 36 years of age to be able to go in, rewrite the books on diplomacy, and to negotiate a fantastic peace deal, which will have an impact on fuel prices, on global security, on oil security, because the Israelis are not in battle with the Arab states that matter in the Middle East.
I agree. Sorry, I'm amused at a couple of comments on the thread here. Someone's saying that on the nuclear codes, he's given the codes to China's. Kim suggests. Someone else suggests Pelosi wants the codes, but Joe can't remember where he put them. Actually, this is right. You may have seen this. A number of House Democrats are concerned that Biden has sole. He's got sole access to the nuclear codes, and this is the guy who, as he said, he doesn't know what he's doing there. So I think we've got a really interesting political landscape ahead, because we've got this weak, dithering president. I don't think he's going to make the term, Rebecca. I think Kamala will be introduced maybe midterms, because, it's funny. I was reading a book on the death of President Kennedy. I just finished it last night. What do I do to relax? I read books about political history. What a sad person I am. And it was a really interesting book on the President JFK. And the events leading up to the murder of JFK. But the one thing that struck me is that, and I'm sure this is true of Boris Johnson and every other major political leader there's been, the minute you go into that position, the pressures that appear on you, Rebecca, are enormous. And most of us don't even know half of the stuff that they get in their daily briefings. Like, I was reading about some of the stuff JFK had to deal with just over his breakfast briefings. Incredible stuff that would demolish most people who are strong and virile and, full of energy. And then you think of Biden, and I'm thinking, how the heck is he going to sustain himself in 4 years with all this stuff coming in across his desk? I just can't see it. Can you? For 4 years?
No, I can't. And it always staggered me. How was that really the best the Democrat Party could do against Trump, who's a powerful personality, hugely popular, all into populist policies?
Yeah.
It seemed very bizarre that they put Biden up, and he feels like a puppet for something else. He feels like a very weak front man, but there were plenty of other very weak front men to put up there. I mean, American politics, I hate it. It's all about money. It attracts the wrong people. It doesn't attract the best. It really doesn't. I just, even Trump, I don't think it ended well. It was all a bit unpleasant. Rudy Giuliani did Trump no favors. Whoever his lawyers were advising him on the voting stuff, they did have evidence, but they really screwed their evidence up. They ran very poor cases. He got let down. White House didn't support him. Like the civil servants weren't there for him. They tried to do him in the whole 4 years, but he did rise very well, and he rose to the occasion because of this enormous narcissistic personality. He did really well.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I think many politicians are narcissists. And Rebecca, sometimes I think that's what attracts narcissists into politics. Well, not sure. Not saying all politics, not saying all councillors, for example, but I'm saying there's an element of that. I mean, it's ego, but hey, like, we've all got egos. But one of the things, like, for example, like last night, and I think we've got a clip of this. I mean, the thing that really made me think that Trump will stand, and I think he will go for it, against what I thought 2 months ago, he kind of almost gave a summary stump speech. And I wonder, can we just play this? It only lasts for about 60 seconds, but he just hits trigger after trigger after trigger. I know it's CPAC, but there's a big, I believe this speech was watched by 31 million people last night. Now, that's more than watched the Golden Globes even, Rebecca. So, the guy's appeal.
They never watched Meghan.
We maybe talk about her before. I don't know if we'll have time to talk about her, but I wonder, can we just, if we can play this, if we can get this clip up on the screen. It was just basically Trump reeling off.
It was all lies. Talked about energy.
Yeah, that one. That's the one.
Actually, about energy, I said, you know, this guy actually, he's okay with energy. He wasn't okay with energy. He wants to put you all out of business. He's not okay with energy. He wants windmills, the windmills that don't work when you need them. Joe Biden has had the most disastrous first month of any president in modern history. That's true. Already the Biden administration has proven that they are anti-jobs, anti-family, anti-borders, anti-energy, anti-women, and anti-science. In just one short month, we have gone from America first to America last. If you think about it, right? America last.
And whether you, again, Rebecca, whether you like him or loathe him, I listened to that and I just thought, wow, that is impressive in terms of that. That's a guy who's thought about, he's a very smart guy, Donald Trump. He's thought about where he's going to go with this one. And it's going to be his American first agenda versus Biden's America last agenda. And everything Biden's going to do is play into the America last narrative. So all of a sudden, I'm thinking something I thought inconceivable, Trump re-entering the White House. But I don't think it's inconceivable. I don't know, maybe it is.
Yeah, the thing that kind of depresses me a little bit about this is that it feels like there's going to be a bigger culture war, and in 4 years' time, 3 years' time. I mean, let's face it, they start campaigning probably even 2 years' time.
22.
I just feel the culture wars are stoked up. Now, I'm not saying I blame Trump for that. I think he's responding now to it rather than instigating it. But I find that it does worry me that there are going to be more culture wars, and there's no end in sight. And I think that is a function of both Trump's personality and Biden's weakness. I just don't think anybody could naysay the fact that Biden is a phenomenally weak individual for whatever reason. I mean, I like you, I'm not going to delve into the whys, but why would you nominate somebody as a president, as a party, who is so obviously weak? It was the culture war, I think, that won it for Biden this time, if you believe he won it. But it will be the culture war that wins it next time. And it's horrible. It's nasty. It's vicious. It can be violent, as we saw with all the BLM riots last summer. It's not a good thing. It's really not a good thing. Trump is so right about business taxes, because he dropped the taxes, took the hit on "you're only here for the rich people." He took the hit on that narrative, and he proved within 6 months how beneficial to everybody low taxes were. Pension funds rocketed. The stock market went crazy. People's pensions were worth, and their savings were worth more. It was a good thing to do. It was business friendly. And I'm afraid that Biden has fallen into the trap of whatever Trump did, I'm going to reverse, because this is a culture war. Even the good stuff has been reversed.
Yeah, I think that's it. Sometimes you only appreciate things in hindsight. And now we've got away from the heat and fury of the November election, and we can look back in those Trump years. As you say, Rebecca, he did achieve tremendous amounts, like in the Middle East. That's going to be an enduring legacy. The re-empowerment of, he put America back to work again. Contrary to what Obama said, he helped create millions of jobs. America became energy independent. Biden's already fundamentally getting rid of that. Another reason for soaring oil prices, by the way. So he achieved a lot. And I agree with you. Had it not been for COVID in 2020 and the narrative that went with that and how the media presented that, I mean, he was way ahead in the polls in February, and then that all collapsed. So, you know, but that's gone. 2020, we can't go back in time, but you can look forward. And I think Trump is easily the most charismatic figure in the Republican field. He dominates it. He is the leader of the GOP, regardless of what some liberals may think. He is the leader. And you can see he does really have a connection to the base, doesn't he? It's the way he speaks. It's his,
but you know, it is really worth saying that, again, I know this is slightly contentious. If Trump sort of distances himself from the QAnon, for the further right wing that exists, Trump was a Democrat once upon a time.
He was. He definitely was. Yeah.
So he can adopt a middle ground. And let's not forget that the middle ground in America is quite right wing compared with us. But he can adopt the middle ground really, really easily by dropping the far right, the nasty side of the far right. Because believe me, in America, far right is nasty far right. He can drop them with no problem. And he's got 2 years now to find a middler ground.
Well,
That's it. Absolutely.
That's exactly what I detected last night. The speech was nuanced. It wasn't red meat exactly, if you know what I mean, for the base. There was some funnies in it and whatnot, but he was charismatic and sensible about the things that he said. For example, and again, it's a topic you and I have talked about, he's focusing on wanting to protect women's sport, which is, I mean, an open goal for him to play into. But he's savvy enough to realize that, and that's not really that's not controversial. The other side.
Well, they're going to court this week, aren't they? Again.
Yes.
The female athletes in Connecticut. Yeah.
Exactly. So, like, when you look at I thought about those agenda items he was ticking off in that 60-second stump speech, and I thought those are really good items. And as the Democrats get in for longer and govern for longer, and more things go wrong, I think that Trump could be I think the GOP will do very well in the 2020 midterms, which, again, you know, they've got this curious 2-year cycle, haven't they, where really you get elected and then very shortly you're campaigning again for the midterms. And could the GOP take the lower house in 2022? I think it's possible. The other thing,
Pelosi's position, because she's 78 herself now, isn't she? She's really cracking on. So in many ways, I think she may feel her work is done, her damage is done, and so they will be looking for a new Speaker of the House, and that is a critical position to have. Now, the current mathematics or the arithmetic of the Senate is 50-50, and the House of Representatives is not an out-and-out majority. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it's not a big majority for the Democrats. It's all very, very marginal. So the thing is that Biden has inherited the worst economic position because of the coronavirus pandemic, although Donald Trump's record on the economy wasn't what did him. It was actually his policies on not locking down America hard enough was what he got criticized for. And I'm not discussing the merits of that, but what he did on the economy actually wasn't that bad. But, you know, Biden has inherited the worst bit of the economy, the worst bit of the pandemic, because he's got to deal with the economy now, but he puts taxes up. It's the worst thing to do for the economy. So in 2 years' time, Donald Trump is going to say, look what happens if you don't put America first. You've screwed it, because America first is dropping taxes again, more than I did. That's what you should have done. He won't have to do it.
And when Americans see the jobs going, and when they see the taxes rising, and when they see then the identity politics being played by the radicals within the Democrats, radicals like Kamala and those behind her as well, I think that's going to make it, it's going to be really interesting to talk about it in 2022. And, you know, I mean, I did see a poll that said if Trump wasn't going to run, who would be the person who most, I know we've got some Americans on the stream here, who would be the candidate? And I think at the moment anyway, and things can change, Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, he's proving massively popular at the moment. So he would be, he's another name that's been mentioned, but I'm Trump towers over them. Literally,
Tom Cotton's a big player. He's a Republican senator he's in the Midwest somewhere, one of the southern Midwestern states. And I think he's growing in prominence. He's very sort of conservative, capital C conservative.
And actually, there's a lady, Donnie Girl says, Christy, I'm never sure how you pronounce this. Yeah. Noem. Who's been very impressive. I mean, there's some, this is the thing, Rebecca, I think there's some really, in fact, that's somebody else. Elia said, yeah, same lady is another great one. Yet there's some fantastic talent in the Republican Party, I think, which is over the next couple of years is going to flourish. So, you know, so I just think it's a really good, I'm just looking at the pronunciations of Noem. No.
So one of the things that's come up in the stream, though, is about AOC becoming the speaker. Not if the House of Representatives goes to the Republicans, it will be a Republican speaker. Actually, so it will be interesting to see who that person is. It will be a person who doesn't necessarily want to be the president. So,
I mean, I couldn't see it. I didn't see that in the stream about AOC, but I suppose if you've got, what is it Trump calls her, Crazy Nancy? If you've got crazy, I love his names, but it's very ad hominem, but it's funny at the same time. If you got Crazy Nancy, I guess Crazy AOC would be possible. Although she's a lunatic, but I mean, a raving socialist lunatic. But I suppose.
They're just too out there, really. I mean, you just don't feel confident that they're a safe pair of hands, do you? You do worry that they're all totally driven and motivated by identity politics.
Yes.
And we all feel a little bit uncomfortable about that. So, yeah, it would be interesting to see. I mean, of course, you and I both love watching American politics as much as our own. In fact, more so because Trump made it massively amusing.
And actually, the other thing about Trump, after the November election, between the results happening and last night, the ratings in CNN and the other major news organizations, they flopped. They went right back because people were only watching them so they could give you the nightly Trump hate. And Trump said this, or he's tweeted that and the other. So, you know, his dominance, it is remarkable, Rebecca, it has to be said, his dominance of the political scene. And now he's back. I think he'll continue to dominate, not Biden. And I'm just interested, if they do dump Biden in 2022 midterms and install Kamala, I wonder would the dynamic be any different, or is it just the Trump?
I think they can't do that. There is a constitutional norm that it's only if he is impeached and convicted, or stands aside on Article 25, I think it is, through ill health or whatever, which is quite likely, or dies in office. Yeah, there's only a very limited number of circumstances in which he can actually hand over to Nancy, two of the biggest ones being death, I think. So,
I would certainly wish him a long and happy retirement, but I just don't think he's fit for the job, and it's painful to watch it. And that's, Rebecca, as we go through 2021, there'll be global events that we don't even know about. Things will happen, and a lot of those things end up on, you know, the White House in the Oval Office on the desk there. And I just think he's not capable of doing it. And even if others are telling him what to say, it doesn't look very credible. So I think events will absolutely expose what the Democrats have done. So although they think they're in a good place because they've got the White House, they've got the Senate, they've got the the lower house, I'm not sure it's that as good as they think it is.
No, it's only just, if you can mobilize that bigger vote, and say what you will, Donald Trump's vote for a loser was a phenomenally high vote. If you can mobilize that many people in the circumstances of 2020, which was a grim year for anybody, then people are motivated, and they will be motivated, I think, more. And as you said, the optics that Donald Trump hinted at last night in that speech.
Yeah.
They're brilliant optics, all of them. Look what you're doing to women. You accuse me of pinching women's bums in the 1970s. Look what you have done to every woman who wants to be a sportswoman.
Yeah.
Every single college girl, look what you've just done to them. That is powerful. That's powerful.
Yeah. As I say, I mean, Trump is a strategist. He's a master strategist. And even though he does have, the other sort of other characteristics to his personality, I think he's. When I heard that last night, I thought that's going to be very hard for the Democrats. Now, of course, as a few people have said here in the stream, Biden and the Democrats, they've got big tech on their side. They've got our friends on Twitter and on Facebook. They've got all them in the back pocket. But I'm not sure that may be enough. I'm not sure that may be enough.
Do you think that affects people's vote? I don't. I think people go to social media to talk about their vote, to talk about what they feel, what they want.
Yeah.
Fake news can affect people's perception.
Yeah.
But if it's the actor themselves talking, no, I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think big tech overeggs its own importance, frankly. I think the social media giants overestimate how important they are in the big wide world. We know that they're huge because they're popular, but it doesn't take much for people to switch off them and find alternatives.
Well, of course, the other thing is Trump is carrying a bit of a grudge against them, understandably. And he did say in his speech last night that the Republican Party need to take away their special privileges. And whether that happens or not, I don't know. Whether it makes the impact he thinks, I also don't quite know. But certainly the landscape's going to change. And that's why I think it's good, to talk about American politics, Rebecca, sometimes. It's global. It affects, as you mentioned, the Middle East. It affects us in the UK as well, by the way, because we've not really seen where Biden's going to be vis-a-vis the UK versus the EU and all of that stuff. We don't really know all of that just yet. So I think it's important to keep our eye on what's happening across the pond in our former colonies over there. If only that dead part of us wouldn't have been so much better. I love it. There's nothing better than winding up Americans, all you Americans watching this, than Brits suggesting that you made such a mistake breaking away from us. Actually, you did the right thing. The history of the American independence is fascinating political history. All the stuff and it's not that long ago, Rebecca. It's not that long ago when you go to the turmoil that happened in the States, and and turmoil still happens. And the one lesson in politics is, the more things change, the more they stay the same. But anyway, nonetheless, we got to the end of this one, so I want to, as ever, thank you, Rebecca, for being here with us. It's a real pleasure to see you as always. So thank you very much. Thank you to all the folks on the stream. For being here. Thanks for all your comments. Thanks for the super chats, all of that business. And just make sure you tune in to my little daily videos. You see them knocking out, I think, usually 1 or 2 a day. So you can watch those if you want. And I will be back definitely on Thursday night on this stream. I will be back elsewhere on Wednesday night, post-budget to have a discussion on, well, we'll be able to see Rebecca on Wednesday night, how accurate or how the things we've talked about play out or not. I'm sure
we'll know what's in the budget on Monday, won't we? Because it'll be in the press.
It's all in the press. Yeah, tomorrow's newspapers will probably select, which is it does annoy me the way things are leaked like that. There's no surprises left anymore because they leak every bloody thing. But nonetheless, thanks.
Can I just say one thing, David, which I don't think you noticed in the stream? Ozzy, really sorry to hear about your dad. I hope he gets better, and I hope he's at home recovering as soon as possible. So lots of love to your dad from us on here.
Yeah, sorry, Ozzy. Rebecca, I didn't see that, so I can't see the comment. But Ozzy, I mean, you're one of our most loyal followers, and you're always here. And elsewhere, I know you're very active on some of my other channels. So listen, I'm very sorry about your dad. Also, Angela McCavanagh, nice to see you on the stream as well. Good to see some of my former Twitterati friends making their way over to these new fields. But anyway, we have come to an end. I just wanted, Rebecca, I always like to finish on a cheery note or even a lunatic note. I saw a picture. I want to put it up just to finish on. This is it. Yeah, do you see this one, Rebecca? A couple are spotted in Waitrose in full hazmat suits. There they go. Rubber gloves and goggles. I mean, that's the way that's definitely what I'm going to do from here on in.
It's COVID secure.
Yeah. And on that note, Rebecca Butler, thanks very much. Thanks everybody for being on the stream. Catch up with you later in the week. That's it for me for now. Good night, everybody.
Bye.